Hello friends, and welcome back to Brews with Ben. This is the next in our style series. So we're going to be reviewing beers of a particular style. Today it's going to be Belgian beers. I have my friend Amy Oblinger with me. So Amy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Amy Oblinger. Go ahead and get this out of the way. I'm sporting a Delirium t-shirt, favorite Belgian brewery. That's the Pink Elephant. I'm a big fan of Belgian beers and couldn't resist the chance to talk about them with Ben and with you guys.
And Amy has a lot of experience with Belgian beers. We were just talking before the show, and I was blown away by her background with Belgian beers. I'm really excited for her to share that with me and with you. Oh. So let's talk about Belgian beers for a minute. This is a really broad category of beers. It's something like 14 of the BJCP styles. Wow. And one of the only things that really connects these is the complexity of Belgian beer. So when you taste a Belgian beer, you're going to taste a lot going on in there. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I noticed, though, is what we call phenolic flavors from the yeast. So I got this off the internet. I'm not even sure what all of this means, but you science folks can help me out. So this comes from the yeast, like I said, and most Belgian yeasts are what are called phenolic off-flavor positive. And that means that the yeast interacts with, I'm reading, ferulic acid to create 4-vinyl guaiacol.
Makes sense to me.
Of course, right?
I mean, naturally.
But really, what it comes down to is it creates phenols that taste spicy, peppery, or like clove. Mm-hmm. So the Belgian example that would be the strongest would be a Saison. So a Saison is going to really have that clove, spicy, peppery flavor to it. But I find that most Belgian beers have some of that. And for me, that's what really ties all of these different styles together.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah. We're going to be trying 5 different beers. And the first one, I'm really excited to share. Hopefully you saw the video. If not, go back and watch it. It's my Belgian Pale that I brewed at the end of July. I hope you like it.
I'm excited.
So this is my home brewed Belgian Pale Ale that I made at the end of July. This is straight out of the Keyser in the garage. Well, kegerator really. It's a refrigerator that I converted. And I'll just go over a little bit about the recipe with you. It had 47% Munich, 47% Pilsner. I used the Belgian Pilsner. 2% biscuit, 2% Crystal 80, 2% Kara Munich, an ounce of Fuggle and an ounce of Glacier, both at 30 minutes. And I used the Belgian Ardennes yeast.
Don't even taste it. Just pound it.
Okay. So I also broke out the tulip glasses.
Oh, thank you.
Right?
Very nice.
Kind of collects the aroma.
Which you're going to have a lot of in a Belgian beer.
It's pretty clear. It's not crystal. It's not brilliant. But I'm happy with it. All I did was cold crash it to try to get some of the stuff out of suspension.
Nice.
Very spicy.
Yeah. Got a little bit of that candy sweetness, too. Mm-hmm. That you want, especially when you're sniffing out of a glass like this. It really just overwhelms in a good way.
I'm going to let you go first because I've already drank a lot of
this.
That's
true. All right, so I had a donut before we got started. Ben and I are filming a little early in the day, and you got to start your day drinking with some donuts. So that was my get the donut out of my mouth.
If you can have a mimosa with a brunch, you can have a beer before noon.
Yes. Ooh. So, definitely getting a little bit of that cloviness we talked about. Mm-hmm. Some of the characteristic sweetness that I always associate with Belgians, again, from the yeast. I'm also feeling a little hoppiness there, which I like. Not all the beers we're going to drink today, I don't think we're going to feel as much of that. And so I always enjoy a Belgian with a nice added hop twist. Mm-hmm.
And I get a lot of earthy sort of flavors from the hops. And Fuggle and Glacier are both known for that. And I think the Glacier gives a little bit of an herbal late in the taste.
Yeah. It sounds weird, but I say it tastes green.
Yeah.
In a good way.
Yeah, that sort of vegetal flavor.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that hop presence was something I was really happy with and really excited about when I finally got to try the beer.
Yeah, and this is America, so it's easy to overdo the hops. And I think you've done a good job of not overdoing the hops.
Thank you. One thing I noticed too is the body is pretty light.
Yeah,
I mean, not thin, but drinkable.
Right. Again, a lot of the ones that we'll try today, and others, if you see Belgian or Belgian style on the label, it'll take you a while to get through a glass. This isn't as heavy. This, this is a porch drinker. Would also go well with a lot of foods.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's a good pairable beer.
Yeah,
whether with friends or with food.
It's 6% though.
No.
Yeah.
Then that's a good 6% beer because, it's going to stand up on its own.
I'm glad you like it.
I'm a fan. Yeah.
Excellent. Up next is Bond's Kriek. This is a traditional Belgian lambic fruit beer. It is brewed according to the traditional lambic style of spontaneous fermentation. Only fresh cherries are used. Bond's Kriek is slightly sweet with the surprising natural fragrance of sour cherries and almonds. With only 4% of alcohol, it is a perfect summer beer. All right, here we go.
All right.
That is red.
It's very red.
It's not pink, it is red.
It's straight up red. Much like the label and the tablecloth.
Matchy.
Yes, here we are. Okay.
Oh, it's funky.
Oh, yeah.
Like right away, you're like, that's a little different.
Mm-hmm. That's a product of that spontaneous fermentation where the yeast comes in from the outdoors, and whatever comes into the room where the beer is being brewed, who knows what you're going to get.
Yeah, if you've watched my brewing videos, I'm very careful about making sure that the fermentation vessel is closed.
Right.
So that the only yeast in there is the brewing yeast that I've put in. When they make lambics, their fermentation vessel is just this big metal table that's wide open, and whatever's floating around, like you said, that's what ferments the beer.
They leave windows open and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, what happens though is oftentimes that yeast remains in the air.
Right.
And it ends up being the same culture. It sticks to the rafters. It's here and there.
Yeah.
So it's not new yeast every time.
Right.
But it sort of is.
Yeah, it's the same and different. Sort of like family members, I guess.
And I noticed this says 2016, and it's got the batch number on it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a testament to the fact that it will change year to year.
Oh, yeah.
And depending on the season and so on and so forth.
And the fruit, probably.
Oh, yeah, that's true. The fruit that they put in. Well, let's talk about that for a minute. So tell me about the process for creating a Kriek.
Sure, yeah. So as we started talking about, the base of a Kriek is a lambic, and its big fermentation process is this spontaneous fermentation that we just talked about. Now, the extra fun part of Kriek, and if you've ever shopped around a bit and seen a framboise or a pêche, it's similar, just raspberry or peach, respectively. But this is better. Don't drink any of that. The idea is that the fruit is added, and then there's a secondary fermentation, because the basic process of fermentation is yeast eating sugar and producing alcohol. So you get a little extra boost because the yeast is going to eat the sugars from the fruit. Now, interestingly enough, it doesn't produce a super crazy alcohol content.
Right.
It just adds some more complex flavors. So that's what a true Kriek is. There's been a little bit of controversy because some of the bigger Kriek producers started adding like cherry syrup at the end of the process to make it a little more marketable to a broader audience. I'm not going to lie, those actually do taste pretty good, but it's not true Kriek. So this is going, and actually I haven't tasted this yet because I wanted to get to
I have.
this moment. This is going to have a much more distinct flavor. Here we go. Oh yes, that's Belgian Kriek right there.
It's tart.
Yeah.
But not as tart as, a beer that would be marketed as a sour.
Right.
You do get some acidity from that lambic.
Oh, definitely.
And then
yeah.
tartness from the cherries that complements that. It's sweet, though, too.
Yeah, it really, truly tastes like cherries.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it tastes like what it is, a sour beer and cherries. But I will say, actually, when I went to pick up this bottle last night, I was at a shop that had New Belgium. They're doing a tasting. And they were tasting their Kriek as well. And I will say that truly tasted like an American sour beer with cherries.
Yeah.
This tastes like Belgian Kriek. And I don't really know how else to say that.
Yeah.
I think part of it is the kind of cherries they use.
Yeah, sure. Traditional Krieks only use, I think it's Schaarbeek.
Sounds good to me.
There are a lot of vowels in that word. But they only use a certain type of cherries that were originally grown just outside of Brussels. So if you're really focusing on a traditional Kriek, you have to use these small little cherries with great big pits. The pits are usually fermented with the cherries in secondary fermentation, so you get a bit of tannin from that. You get that kind of winey quality, the dry finish on the tongue. And I'm getting that.
Oh, yeah. And I will say, to kind of bring it back around to the bigger Belgian conversation, there's still, I feel, some qualities in common with all Belgian beers, like you were saying, in this. You'll hear the term candy sweetness a lot from the yeast, and I'm getting a bit of that. Obviously, we've already discussed the yeast is a whole different process in Kriek, but there's still, I think, a unifying quality that will connect this with all the other beers we're drinking.
Yeah. This is a very accessible beer.
It is, yeah.
Because it does sort of taste like fruit juice.
It kind of does, yeah. Grown-up fruit juice.
Do you want to tell your story about...
Speaking of this being an accessible beer, so this whole story might need to get edited down for time because it's long, but it's fun, and I'm going to tell y'all anyway. So, I grew up in the Appalachian South in a teetotaling home. Not only did we not drink, but drinking was a sin. Oddly enough, that same family decided to host an exchange student from Belgium when I was in high school. Obviously, coming to America in high school, she wasn't going to be allowed to drink anyway, but still there's a cultural dynamic of she had been drinking since she was probably 6 years old, legally since she was about 14. So to come to America, one, and not get to drink at all was a thing. But to then come and live with a family for a year who did not believe in drinking was, I'm sure, a major shock to her. And as much as it was to us to have a 17-year-old in our house who'd been drinking for many years of her life. Also growing up in that environment, I didn't even know Belgian beer was a thing. You know, there's sort of the stereotypes, German beer, Irish beer, and Bud Light. And that's about all I knew about beer.
Yeah.
So for her to even talk about Belgian beer and to roll her eyes at the mere mention of German beer, this was all new to me. Well, fast forward a few years, I'm in college. I've loosened things up quite a bit. I'm drinking all the alcohol now. And I go to visit her in Belgium. And, you know, I talk to her like, yeah, that's dumb. I drink beer now. So this, not necessarily Boon, whatever we pronounce it, Kriek was the first beer I drank in Belgium and obviously fell in love with it. I've been drinking other beers at this point, but when I drank Kriek, I said, oh yes, I'm a fan of Belgian beer. And the rest is history.
This is Duvel. A Duvel is still seen as the reference among strong golden ales. Its bouquet is lively and tickles the nose with an element of citrus, which even tends towards grapefruit, thanks to the use of only the highest quality hop varieties. This is also reflected in the flavor, which is beautifully balanced with a hint of spiciness. Thanks to its high CO2 content, this beer has a wonderful roundness in the mouth. A Duvel is both the perfect thirst quencher and the ideal aperitif.
So, I have a confession to make.
Uh-oh.
And as a beer guy, I'm a little ashamed of this. I've never had Duvel.
Oh, man.
I know.
Oh, God.
It even in their description from the brewery, they said, you know, it's the standard for a Belgian Golden Strong. I haven't had it.
Well, you know what? Today's the day. Yes. First time for everything.
Okay. The head is just hanging on.
Massive. And if you can't, sorry, viewers, you can't really see inside, but it's got almost like a fungal quality, like looking inside of it. Like
it looks like meringue.
Yeah. It's very yeah. It's very much like a cartoon looking beer with the collar and the massive head.
Smells spicy, bit of cloves.
Mm-hmm. Definitely get that piney hoppiness. Here we go. Very bubbly.
Yeah.
I need another one.
I'm sure the viewers love all the times on my shows when it's just me and somebody else silently drinking.
It's important. It's part of the process to teach you how to be silent while you drink your beer.
Think about it, right?
Yeah.
Too often, I think we as Americans have been trained by the mass brewing companies to just drink in large quantities.
More is better.
Right. And not really think about the flavor of what we're having. But there's so much to beer, and if you stop and you really break down what you're tasting, I think it's a really satisfying experience.
I will say I think beer drinkers can learn from wine drinkers in that regard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, about Duvel.
Yes.
So the phenolic flavor, that spicy yeast flavor, is strong.
Yes, it is. Definitely. Which for me also, as I've mentioned, has a sweet profile. That definitely has that Belgian yeast quality that we've talked about. I'm definitely getting that grapefruit that they mentioned. Now, maybe I'm getting that because the description told me I would get it.
True.
But it's hoppy. It's a hoppy characteristic, not unlike our first beer.
Mm-hmm. But it's more on the citrus side of the hop spectrum.
Oh, yes. Less earthy.
Yeah, that one
citrus.
was more on the earthy herbal side.
Mm-hmm.
The carbonation is really a neat experience because it just sort of dances on your tongue.
Very much so. Yeah, because of that, I think it lingers a little more than you'd expect from a beer with this color.
Yeah, and it sort of coats the tongue and the mouth.
Very much, yeah.
And gives that lingering flavor. It's bitter.
It is.
Yeah, surprisingly bitter for a style that's not known for bitterness necessarily.
Right. I think this would be a good crossover beer for fans of IPAs. For American style drinkers who don't think they like Belgian beer, who would be inclined to say, oh, Belgian beers are too sweet, they're too yeasty, then they should drink this.
Yeah. It's good.
Well, excuse me.
I mean,
Sorry.
I'm not going to... I don't want to give the impression that these things are bad things that we're describing.
No, not at all.
Very good.
Yeah. And especially coming from a Kriek to this, there's a lot of contrast, and I think that's kind of why it stands out so much.
But I think if you diluted this and you put in a few pounds of cherries, like
I can
it wouldn't
see the relationship.
be that different. It doesn't have the funkiness that had.
True.
From the lambic.
It's a lot calmer in that way.
Yeah.
This is Westmalle's Tripel, a strong, dry, and spicy Trappist ale, the product of a secondary fermentation lasting 5 weeks. This is a complex ale with a fruity aroma and a nice, nuanced hop scent. It is soft and creamy in the mouth, with a bitter touch carried by the fruity aroma. An exceptional ale with a great deal of finesse and elegance, and with a splendid long aftertaste.
Okay, so to think a little bit more about the Trappist style, Westmalle has a handy-dandy couple sentences on their back label that we thought we'd share with you. Rich golden triple, brewed in a Trappist abbey under the monks' supervision. Brewery income is used to maintain the abbey, and profits are donated to charity. Yeah.
There was a bit of a kerfuffle about 20 years ago about Trappist ales. And the monks actually created a law that says, or, they kind of copyrighted it, right?
Basically, yeah.
That says that if it says it's Trappist on the bottle, it must be brewed by monks, and the profits must go toward the monastery.
Right.
Yeah. So you'll sometimes see Trappist style beers that are similar, but those are not brewed by monks. They're brewed by a brewery or
It's
someone
basically like champagne or champagne style, méthode traditionnelle, something like that. In fact, this has a little tiny thing on the back. You might see that little hexagon, authentic Trappist product.
Right, and you'll only see that on the ones brewed by the monks.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
The head on this, just like the Duvel, the head is just hanging on. Mm-hmm. It's highly carbonated.
Yeah. Ooh, very clovey, very sweet.
But not as strong of a clove smell as the Duvel was.
I don't think so. It doesn't quite blast you as much as the Duvel did.
I think it's a little sweeter. I also noticed it's a little darker than the Duvel.
It is, yeah. And I think a little cloudier.
Yeah. I think this is bottle conditioned.
Yes, I believe so. Let's see.
Do they mention it?
They do. Westmalle is bottle conditioned and contains live yeast.
So what that means is instead of carbonating the beer and then bottling it, what they do is they bottle the beer with a little bit of sugar still in it, and then cap it, sealing it. And that sugar is fermented by the yeast that's still in the beer and creates carbonation within the drink. So that will create a bit of cloudiness because you still have the yeast there.
Right.
It's not filtered.
There's a lot still happening in the thing that's being poured from the bottle into your glass.
Right. You can tell it's 9.5%
Yeah, you can.
right away.
It is not messing around.
Not in a bad way, but you know that this is a strong beer.
Yeah. I sometimes get the impression with these higher ABV Belgians, whiny in a W-I-N-E kind of wine.
Like wine.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
But there's a sweetness, a smoothness. Wow, a minute after taking my first sip, it's still doing lots of interesting things on my palate that I just noticed as I was talking.
That's interesting about the wine because wine, is 13-14%. And I wonder if it's the alcohol that contributes to the way our body interacts with the drink.
I would think so, but I don't know for sure.
If you know, please
Yeah.
comment. Tell us. Help us out.
Mention in the comments. I'll be sure
It's a
to.
good beer.
It is very nice.
I mean, these monks have been brewing it for hundreds of years, so they know what they're doing.
Fun fact that Wikipedia told me, and hopefully is correct as I say this, Westmalle was the first brewery anywhere to use the term triple.
Ah.
No one really knows why, I believe. Some other breweries later on have said, oh, it's because we use triple the amount of malt in the brewing process. I don't know that that's what Westmalle had in mind. Some have suggested, oh, well, it's just because of how strong it is, how much alcohol it has. I don't really know. But the general consensus seems to be that triple is kind of an ambiguous term.
Right. Yeah. You'll find that singles, doubles, and triples. You'll find all of these in Belgian beers or Trappist beers too, and all of those things are true, right?
Right.
So you've got the singles, which are usually low ABV, more of a sessionable beer, sometimes called Potter beer or Father's beer,
Right.
and this is what the monks historically would drink with their meals.
It was their beer.
It was their beer,
They didn't
right?
sell it, yeah.
Exactly. And then you've got the doubles, which are a little stronger, often a little darker as well.
Yeah.
And then you've got triples, again, a little stronger still. And I think next we have a quad, which is even stronger still.
Yes.
But yeah, with the development of, different breweries each putting out their style of triple or their style of double, the terms have become sort of ambiguous.
Right.
And it means something different for each brewery.
I've heard that that a triple is a more mature single and that a quad is a more mature double, because your triples and your singles tend to be your more golden, lighter colored, and your doubles and your quads tend to be darker colored. I don't know, again, about the actual, if that's observational or if there's some fact behind that. I think when we crack open the next beer, we might
Yeah.
have a little more insight about that.
Well, and that might be true for one brewery,
True.
but not for another who uses the same term.
Right. Or for Americans who are trying to make Belgian styles, but the Belgian breweries aren't necessarily paying attention to that.
Right.
Who knows? And it could have to do with the kinds of malts that they use or the type of yeast, the aging process. Who knows? But we're just going to keep drinking all of them and see what we like best, I suppose.
This is a very drinkable beer.
It is.
I don't find that the clove and pepper that you get from the phenol overpower.
Not
I
at
think
all.
they're well balanced by the sweetness and the alcohol.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's dangerously drinkable at 9.5%.
Definitely.
Yeah. Very, very nice.
Yeah. And I'm still getting a little hop profile in there.
A little bit.
A little bit. I don't think it's the primary quality of this beer, but you can tell that they didn't shy away from it.
Yeah. Often Belgians are hopped early in the boil, and that's it. So
True.
that bit of bittering is enough to balance the sweetness and the alcohol, which we interpret as sweetness.
That's true. I think that's a good way of saying it, especially with the bottle fermentation on this, which is what we're getting as that sort of finishing quality.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Nice beer.
indeed.
This is Three Philosophers from Brewery Ommegang. Three Philosophers, oh, say that 10 times fast, is a unique blend of a Belgian-style dark ale and Leafman's Kriek, an authentic cherry ale from Belgium. Cherry chestnut in color, it's opaque but not cloudy, with full carbonation topped by a smooth tan head. Flavors and aromas of roasted malt, molasses and brown sugar, dark fruits, brandied raisins and chocolate. Three Philosophers has notable sweetness with low hop bitterness. The mid palate shows a soft malt center, which gives way to a dry, warm, wine-like finish. The complexity of this beer make it a good candidate for aging gracefully, as spicy, sherry, and port notes should intensify.
All right.
So I hadn't had Duvel, but I have had Three Philosophers.
Yeah.
This is probably my favorite beer.
Such a good beer.
Much, much darker
Yeah, totally
than
different
anything
color.
we've had.
Yeah.
And that goes back to what we started with, the complexity of Belgian beers. There's so many different things you can do. Now, the Germans were sort of hamstrung by Reinheitsgebot. So they could only use malt, or barley, right? Barley malt, hops, water, and then later on they realized that there was yeast in play.
That's important.
But that was it.
That's it.
There was no such rule in Belgium. You can use whatever you want.
Anything goes. Fruit, whatever.
So that, created a complexity.
Yeah.
It, toffee, caramel,
Yeah.
dark fruit, like they said.
Little brown sugar, which is the base of caramel, so that's a bit redundant, but whatever.
But no, I know what you mean, that brown sugar
Yeah.
sweetness, right?
Oh, yeah.
More so than caramel. Like, if you're smelling caramel, you don't smell sweetness quite as much as this. This
Right.
smells really sweet. Okay, here we go.
Here we go.
Man, there's so much going on in
Yup.
that beer. I actually didn't know until today that it was a blended beer.
Right. I knew but had forgotten.
So this is common in a lot of aged beers or sour beers and a lot of Belgian beers, right? Especially lambics.
Yeah.
They'll take something that's older, that's been aging for months or even years, and blend it with something younger to get the qualities of both.
Yep. Which again takes me back to the wine comparison because that's incredibly common in the wine world. So I find it interesting, especially the description you read specifically mentioned wine, and then for aging, port and sherry. So wine kind of keeps coming back into the conversation about certain kinds of beer.
It's a fun experiment to take a beer like Three Philosophers and buy it and then cellar it. And then buy one the next year
Right.
and compare the two.
Yeah.
And I've known people too that will buy 2 or 3 each year. So that way they can keep doing it. Like, okay, this one's 3 years old and this is 2 years old and this is brand new. And you get very, very different flavors from them. as they age.
Yeah. And a beer definitely designed to do that. And has a bunch of strong qualities to enable it to hold up to age.
Right. Yeah, you cannot age Coors Light. It's not going to work.
FYI.
Right, that's going to go bad. That's a beer you want to drink fresh. Now, I like Coors Light, but you want to drink it fresh. Right. It's meant to be drunk fresh. This, you can age and it'll stand up. Usually you want to age higher ABV beers. And like you said, those with like very complex flavors that will develop and change over time.
This one has a very strong mouthfeel, which is not really something that's stood out to me from the other beers, but it has a sort of lingering quality for me. That's not a bad thing. And I think what's lingering is back to that sort of roasty sugar caramel. It's very nice. Carbonation a little less aggressive, maybe.
Little.
The Duvel and the Westmalle, but it's still
pretty high.
It's a nice bubbly beer, yeah.
Yeah. Which we've noticed in all of the beers so far today. All these Belgian beers are highly carbonated. So if you're home brewing, you might want to crank up the regulator a little bit to get the same sort of quality.
For a sense of authenticity, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it changes the way you experience the beer, and it changes the flavor of the beer. We do taste carbonation.
Oh, yeah.
There's something called carbonic bite. It's sort of an acidic sort of flavor that you get from higher carbon dioxide levels.
Sure. Which I think in a beer like this, and I think you mentioned this with the Westmalle, it kind of balances that high alcohol and that a little bit of higher sweetness, too.
I get the alcohol in the, like, nasal...
Yes, that little pointy bit where your palate connects to your nose. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's where I get the, woo.
Yeah, you sort of feel it right in the middle part of your face, which is funny. We're both saying that as singers and vocal.
All right, here at the end, I like to put my guests on the spot. You have to pick which is your favorite, which is your least favorite.
Well, I will say, when we were filming the previous segment, we did get cut off a bit. So you missed my gems of wisdom, all due to the fact that I was drinking Three Philosophers, which I said makes me feel so much more philosophical the more I drink it.
Oh, yeah.
Also, there's a great poem on the back of the label about the history of Three Philosophers. We didn't have time to read that to you, but you should read it yourself. Okay, so feeling as philosophical as I do, I'm going to head for favorite first, and it's going to be either Kriek or Three Philosophers. The complexity of the Three Philosophers, I loved the maltiness balanced with the alcohol, and there's just so much going on with that little background of cherry that I think that might have gotten cut off too because it's blended with the Kriek.
Right.
But this was my first love, as we have discussed. So if I'm going to be put on the spot, if I could only have a second taste of one beer right now, it would be Kriek. Okay.
Now, which one, if you could only have 4 of the 5, which would you leave out?
I think I'd leave out the Duvel.
Ah.
It was, I think for me, it had a little too much bubble bite. And though it was, I think, one of the hoppier ones, along with yours, I think I love a lot of the balance that you did with the hop quality of yours. And quite frankly, if I'm going to have 4 beers and one of the choices could be a local brewer, I'm going to take it.
Thanks.
So there you go.
All right. So my favorite, and it's always been my favorite, is Three Philosophers. I think when you add sort of the caramel malts and things, when the darker complexity to these guys, you just add that extra level of intensity, complexity that just makes it really wonderful. If I had to leave one behind, I like the Westmalle better than the Duvel. The Kriek is like in its own category.
It really is,
because it's a fruited sour. I think I would leave the Duvel.
All right.
Yeah. I think the Westmalle had a little more sweetness that balanced a little better than the Duvel. This is hard, though, because they're all delicious, and they're all so different.
Yes. Yeah.
I think the Westmalle and Duvel were the most similar.
I agree. Yeah. Which kind of surprised me a little bit, but maybe it shouldn't. They're definitely from the same family, and they're definitely the two actual Belgian beers that were not a fruit beer.
Right.
So I shouldn't be too surprised that they had that much in common.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing these with me.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. Thanks for your beer and for the opportunity. Hopefully you've got some great sour beers, listen to me, Belgian beers to choose from, and some background into them for your future drinking.
Thanks for joining us on our Belgian beer episode. I hope you enjoyed watching. Belgian beer is such a broad category that you can find something you like within it, whether it's Golden Strongs or Saisons or Krieks or wit beers. There's so many different things. Don't be afraid of trying a beer just because it says Belgian. In fact, seek out a beer that says Belgian. Thank you again to Amy Oblinger for coming out. She's a wonderful person, a fabulous artist. Happy to have her. And if you enjoyed what you saw, if you'd like to see more, please like and subscribe. And I'll see you later, friends.